Welcome to Coleman Report Live. I'm Bob Coleman, and we're talking Main Street and the small business lenders who help it grow. Lance, we're not quite in dog days of August, but it sure feels like it to me. I don't know about you.
Oh, Bob, it does. We hit 98 degrees yesterday and about 98% humidity.
I was going to say, forget the temperature. What's your humidity like? Hey, we'll be up front. It's a slow news day. We have some stuff. If there's any topics you want us to cover next week, just shoot an email over to us. We'll be happy to do that. I think you all know about the certificates. Save those. Put them in a file. It satisfies the answer on if you are what you're doing for training. So I think that's very important. Let's go to the polls. Can you submit forgiveness applications before the covered period expires? Lance, we keep on asking this question, don't we?
Bob, you're quizzing our Friday participants here. I want to see what they say.
Very good. How do we do it, Lance? How do we do it, Lance?
Well, the PPP borrowers can either choose the 8 or the 24-week covered period, but if they choose the longer covered period, you can submit forgiveness once you've spent the money. So the forgiveness application can be submitted before the covered period expires.
Joseph, make a note. I'd sort of like to know this. Is Sacramento, the 504 Sacramento, are they calculating in the debt ratio the PPP amount? Lance, do you know that offhand?
I do not know that, but my expectation is they do. I think that most lenders now are looking at, there's a PPP loan that potentially has a payment. It's kind of a catch-22 because let's say you got a PPP loan and you're looking at a new expansion loan. Most lenders are going to add that PPP payment until it's forgiven back into the debt coverage calculations.
Well, and you and I have talked about this. I mean, that just blows up some debt service coverage ratios, doesn't it, Lance?
Well, and I really would love to hear if somebody could get a response from Citrus Heights or Sacramento. Are they including the full payment in debt coverage calculations? Because
we'll do a little research. We'll ask poll questions, and we'll get that for next Monday or Tuesday. Absolutely.
The challenge, Bob, is many of these larger PPP loans have huge payments if it's not forgiven.
I know, and that's that's going to be an issue definitely down the line. Hey,
but we have to.
Go ahead, Lance.
Most of them are going to be forgiven. So, I mean, I think they're, when we get to the forgiveness part, my guess is 95 to 97% of the loans will be forgiven. Yeah,
I mean, the smaller loans I'm not too concerned about. Is some of those larger loans that are going to be an issue, especially for documentation. I'm surprised at this, Lance. I thought I'd see more yes answers.
Well, I think that, again, it all goes to the speed of the rollout. And, I love reading what Katie writes about on various PPP applicants who submit fraudulent applications. You have to believe that there were quite a few fraudulent documents submitted as part of a PPP application.
Joseph, go back to the numbers. I always forget doing this. Go back to the numbers so the people who don't have access to the screens can see it. Yes is 21%. No is 45%. Go ahead, Lance.
Well, I think that it's hard to expect to go through a program that is this massive with the number of applications, a program that was rolled out as quickly as PPP was, to not have some bad players get involved in applying for a PPP loan. The thing that really comes home for me, Bob, is we don't want to beat the it's like we talked about yesterday with our friend from Boca. We don't want to beat the program up because of a few bad players And it's just like these large PPP loans to Kanye West and all these folks like this. Yeah, there are a few people that got it, but think of all the thousands and thousands and thousands of small businesses who did this right, did it legitimately, and got the help they needed.
Absolutely. And Lance, what is the duty to the lender if we receive something? I know I've talked to lenders, and there's a way to go to ADP to verify the numbers, and they've received several applications where obviously the whole thing was fraudulent. Is there a responsibility, a duty to the lender to report that to the Inspector General, or is that just sort of nice to do as opposed to must do?
I think it is appropriate to report any fraudulent applications to the SBA Inspector General.
Okay, very good. Question number 3, have you seen SBA disaster loan applications increase the last couple months, June, July 2020? Why do we want to know this? Why do we want to know this, Lance?
See, I don't see EIDL loans, and most lenders will not. But, my question is, I get a ton of phone calls from borrowers about EIDL loans. And so the phone activity I've had related to EIDL loans has been greatly increased in June.
19% say yes, 49% say no. Katie, let's bring you into the conversation. Ovita Carranza was on Fox News defending the PPP program. Tell us what she told Fox Business.
So she did acknowledge that there were some of the loans that obviously went to larger companies, but she called those an anomaly. And she said, really, there were so many small businesses that were helped through this program that those large businesses, they are going to handle it. The SBA will be looking into those businesses that did not, or they got a loan and they should not have gotten a loan. And they're obviously going to take action against those. However, she did say that already $30 billion worth of the program has been returned. And I don't know if that was legitimate small businesses that got scared or if that's larger businesses that legitimately should not have gotten the loan. I would hope it's just the larger businesses.
Yeah. And
Well,
go ahead, Lance.
I do think some of the return money were legitimate small businesses who got PPP loans who were uneasy about the forgiveness process when it was such a moving target. So, I do believe that some of the money returned was legitimate PPP funding. And then there was quite a bit that were larger companies who didn't want the bad press.
Katie, do we know how much is left in the bucket?
She said yesterday that it was still over 130 billion. So it sounds like it's really hovering right there, and that might be because there's so much that's being refiltered back into the program. At one point, we were even seeing the numbers go up week by week. So it's really hovering there.
Good. Well, that what that tells me is everyone who wants a PPP loan is able to access that. And obviously, we always need to keep in mind that this purpose is to protect employment. That's the key to this. Hey, thanks to, and I believe it was Sharon, and Paul, anyway, someone sent me this the flyer from the ABA. Lance, this is a continuation of the agent fee question we had. It is in the dashboard, and basically it's saying there should be the bottom line with all this, there should be a conversation between the CPA firm and the lender on how the CPA firm gets paid.
Well, I think one of the things that's critical is, on the application for the PPP loan, did the borrower mark there was somebody who helped them? There was a specific question related to that. How else would the participant bank have a clue as to whether there was an agent
relationship? Yeah.
Well, and Chris Hearn brought that up the other day when we were talking about the same issue. He's like, there's And I concur. There is a checkbox for the borrower if somebody assists them, and if they don't say yes, is the bank required to track down every PPP loan and see if somebody assisted? I don't think they have time for
it. In order to talk about Fraud Friday, Katie, you have to be able to pronounce the profession correctly. I will go ahead.
Gosh, ophthalmologist.
Very
it's
good.
Eye doctor. So yeah. Well, what were you gonna say, Lance?
Oh, I was just saying, great job. Now we have to spell it. No.
No, we're not going to go
that word. Yeah. So this man is an eye doctor in New York, and basically we have to track the case really back to November when he was indicted on fraud charges for medical fraud. What he was allegedly doing was submitting false claims about surgeries and upcoding procedures. And it turns out like there's a eye procedure that they normally do very frequently, and he never billed for it once. And so based on that, he allegedly received about $3 million that he should not have received because of that. Flashing forward to PPP starting, he decides to apply for not one but two PPP loans using the same information and just kind of tweaking it. He changed the name of the business, but left the same payroll, all the same employees on the list. And he ended up approved for over $600,000 worth of PPP loans, as both of those loans did go through.
One of the things about E-Tran submission of the PPP loan, a borrower could do this as long as they use different taxpayer ID numbers.
Right, and that's what
that's the key to this one. I hate to give tips on how to do it the wrong way, but if you had two similar businesses that use similar documentation at different banks, those two banks are not going to call and compare because there's no reason for them to. If he had two different taxpayer ID numbers, it is very possible, but I mean, it's not possible, it happened, that those could be put into E-Tran and get funding numbers.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously he's allegedly an expert on Medicare fraud and decided to go do, another 600,000. It just amazes to me, these people, they jeopardize their potential earning in the future for these type of frauds. It's just amazing. Hey,
this would be really hard, Bob, for a bank to catch because we didn't have to run a LexisNexis. We didn't have to run a Cavers. We didn't have to run a credit report on this.
Right.
So, picking up on the fact that this guy is a fraud expert, unless he checked the box, you wouldn't know.
Hey, Wendy, this is a great question. I'm going to, instead of Lance, have you had a chance to take a look at this question? Otherwise, we're going to hold it over till Monday.
No, I have not. Probably should hold it over to Monday.
Yeah, we'll hold that over till Monday. Rebecca asked a great question. And I love this question, Lance, and you probably have a better feel for this than I do. But in doing our budget for the balance of the year and possibly for next year, what should lenders anticipate the default rate to be when these PPP, we start rolling them over?
Well, the SBA default rate prior to COVID-19 was relatively low, below 2%. It's like 1.8, 1.7.
Right.
That default rate has benefited from low interest rate environments, a pretty good economy. If I could predict what's going to happen to the economy, I think we're going to have a few rough days in front of us, Bob. Would not feel uncomfortable saying probably we'll see that rate double going forward.
Let's do this, Joseph. Let's ask this question next Monday. Do you think we're approaching 5%, Lance? Are we under 5%? What do you think?
I don't think we'll get over 5%, but I think 5% is a very real possibility. Rebecca, it's a great question. And one thing I do want to add, I don't think there's going to be a lot of default activity in 2020.
Right.
I think it's going to be in 2021. The thing about 2020 is most of our borrowers are benefiting from CARES Act payments. Many of those are going to run at least through October. Some will run through December. So they're not going to technically, most of them shouldn't be in the default. The ones that will until probably early 2021. So I don't see a big change this year, but next year I do.
Yeah. We have a ton of questions. Let's try to get to them before the end of the week. Lisa just made a comment. We had some go through using the same EIN number. 2 loans had the same EIN number, so they weren't even smart enough to figure out how to get a second one. Any thoughts on borrowers getting a second PPP loan? Asked Craig, and the answer is yes under Main Street. Correct, Lance?
Well, no, a second PPP loan would be under P4, which
But that's you're right. I'm sorry.
P4 is subject to approval, and there are going to be some requirements in terms of revenue reduction on P4 to get that second PPP loan.
Bruce asked the question. They did an economic disaster loan. It was deducted from the PPP loan amount by the lender at disbursement, assuming it was done between January 2020 and April 2020. It is my understanding that now the disaster advance, not the loan, will be deducted from the forgiveness amount. Am I correct?
Lenders have handled that in a different way. The advance, some took it out of the PPP funds. Some may take it out of the forgiveness amount. I really think this is something that SBA, Bob, should issue guidance on so everybody's really clear, because I think it's been done 2 different ways, and I think there is a lot of confusion. I actually had a PPP borrower who got an EIDL loan, and the EIDL loan was paid off with the PPP loan, and the guy said, wait a second, the EIDL loan was, anyway, not all, this was someone who called me, not all for payroll. So all of a sudden, he took a loan that was on a longer payback and put it on a PPP loan with a 2-year payback. So
Chris
there's
asked,
a lot of
go ahead, Lance.
A lot of confusion, Bob, that it'd be nice if SBA just issued a clear statement on how to handle EIDL advance.
Well, you and I both said June 30th, and now we're 2 weeks behind that. Chris asked a great question. I think we've had it before, but what are the tax implications to the borrowers who get PPP loans, specifically the forgiveness? The more specific question is forgiveness, is that taxable income?
Guys, I'm going to state this, and this is just, I'm not 100% certain, but my understanding is PPP forgiveness cannot be taxable. But I could be wrong on that, but that's my current. And I'll look into the CARES Act and make sure if we can revisit this on Monday, Bob. But my understanding is it's not taxable.
Yeah, and the answer is I don't know, and that's something we will, Joseph, add it to the list. Finally,
Bob, I hope it's not, Bob, because that's like, okay, employer, keep your employees, pay them. Oh yeah, by the way, the money we forgive them, we're going to nail you with tax at the end.
Yeah, we're obviously Lance and I are fumbling over the answer, and we'll try to get some more clarification on that.
But I'm pretty sure, Bob. I'm pretty sure it's not taxed.
Jackie asked, if a borrower chooses the 24-week period, is their payroll prorated based on the number of weeks they use the money? If they spend it all before the 24 weeks, how do we do that?
In terms of forgiveness, if they spend all the money on payroll, they're going to be fine.
Even if it's before the 24 weeks, yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Very good. Hey, thank you all for your support. Thank you for joining us. Speaking of taxes, guess what I'm doing this weekend, Lance? I don't know if you've completed yours.
I got mine in early, Bob. Got it in
Well,
early.
I have my weekend planned out. Hey, thank you for joining us today for Coleman Report Live and supporting America's Main Street, one entrepreneur at a time. Talk to you next week. Thank you.
Have a great week.
Have a great weekend.